As designers, when we undertake projects, we want to do the best job we can. And to do that, we need to achieve the right results. To achieve those results, we need to understand exactly what the design task requires. When we undertake any design, we really want to avoid making arbitrary decisions. A lot of inexperienced designers may want to jump right into the fun part of the design process, the act of designing or creating. However, understanding the project's requirements could possibly be the most important step in your design process. If you fail to give this adequate attention, you could completely miss your project's goals. The best design work is work that fulfills its purpose or function and delivers on the requirements of the project. In doing so, your aims will be to communicate a key message or concept boldly and clearly, communicate a key message or concept in a unique, visually exciting and engaging way, have a good rationale behind it, create meaningful, appropriate and relevant solutions, and if it looks great too, that's a bonus. As I've said before, graphic design is not about making things look pretty. Graphic design is the organization and presentation of information visually, developed through a creative process for a particular function. Before we begin the design process for any project, we should always seek to understand what that particular function is. As designers, we need to be able to ask the right questions to enable us to fully understand in order to answer with correct solutions. To do this, we should start by seeking as much information about the project as possible. Now, this information is typically provided to us in the form of a design brief. So what is a design brief? Well, in short, a design brief is a document provided before the start of a project that should contain key information, criteria, and instructions ready for a designer to effectively start a project. A typical brief should include all the relevant information a designer will need in order to understand the context, the requirements, and the needs of the project. It may help to think of the design brief as the problem and the task that will need to be solved. A design brief can also contain supporting documentation such as further reading, marketing documents, guidelines, and any other reference documents relevant to the project. So here is an example of a typical design brief. Now, not every brief will be the same. Terminology and structure will vary, but it should all cover similar criteria to adequately prepare the designer to start a project. If you wish to take a closer look at this example brief, you can find a download link in the description. So why is the design brief so important? Well, the design brief is really key to the development of a project. The more thorough the initial design brief, the more informed a designer will be to solve the design problems required by a project effectively. One of the most frustrating things that can happen to any designer is having to create work without being given an adequate design brief. This can delay the process, it can misguide a designer, or a client might not like or be happy with the end result, which leads to lots of amends having to be made in future. So lots of time can be wasted, a nightmare for most designers. Having a well outlined and detailed brief will help a designer stay on point, will be the source of reference for the duration of the project, and can be used to contest solutions later should there be any disputes. A successful project starts with a well thought out design brief. Now, there are two types of briefs. A design brief will typically either be an open brief or a closed brief. Basically, open and closed briefs vary in the degree of creative freedom they offer. The open brief will typically offer more creative freedom, whereas the closed brief will offer less. For example, an open brief may be designing an entire visual brand identity from scratch, where you have the task of, say, creating a logo identity and a visual brand, where you are able to define all the elements like colors, image treatments, typography, layouts, and so on, a whole look and feel for a brand. A closed brief, for example, may be, say, creating a leaflet or flyer for a brand that has already established its logo identity and its visual brand, where you may have to refer to the guidelines in order to stick to predefined colors, typography, and rules. Now, I won't go into this in too much detail here. There is much more to be said on this topic, which I will be going into in a future video. So before we take on any design project, we will always want to start with the design brief. With the design brief in hand, one can begin the design process. Now, I personally will never start a project until I feel I have an adequate design brief in place, because for me, it's really important to do a good job. Now, a quick question you may be wondering, what if I'm not given a design brief? Well, this is a really good question because it is not always the case that a brief will be presented to you. Depending on who you're working for or with, you may be given a well-detailed brief, you may be given some verbal instructions, or you may be given no brief at all. Typically, when I work with design agencies or professional clients, a good, thorough brief is provided. But some clients don't understand the design process, the need for a design brief, or even how to create a design brief. Some clients will also feel they don't have the time to create one. Some clients may feel that a meeting will be more beneficial, where ideas and the project can be discussed verbally in a more informal and collaborative scenario. Whatever the case may be, you will want to establish a solid design brief before starting a design project. If one is issued to you, then great, but if not, there are steps you can take, and I would recommend in order to create one, which I will be discussing in a future episode. So that is an introduction to the design brief and why I think it's important. So what are your thoughts on the design brief? Be sure to share your thoughts in the comment section. And if you wish to learn more about open and closed briefs and how to build your own brief, you can see links in the description to other videos where I go into those topics in more detail. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell button to be notified of more design discussion videos like this in future. Also, if any of you have any other design topics you would like to see me discuss, be sure to pop them in the comments or email me at creative@garethdavidstudio.com and I'll look to create another discussion video in future. Until then, have fun guys, and I'll see you next time.